Those of you who follow my channel will know that I've been taking some training with my local IAM group. Every group is a little bit different, but the way that mine works is you join a structured course, which is 5 rides, and then after the 5 rides you can either do your test if you're ready for it, or you can just do a couple more ad hoc observed rides until your test ready. Rides 1 to 4 are focused on things like bends, overtaking, roundabouts, and then ride 5 is a putting it all together ride, so it's usually a little bit longer, and it's just a general ride that has a bit of a mix of everything. So last week I did my ride number 5, and honestly I did some of the best riding that I think I've ever done since I got my bike. First we did a couple of junctions on the motorway, and if you remember from when I did my ride number 2, I hate motorways because I was on L plates for ages and I never really practiced them. But since then I've made a conscious effort to go out and practice motorways as often as I can, which is super boring, but it means that I'm much more confident now, and I think it really shows in my riding. I did pretty well on this motorway section. I got a couple of overtakes in, I didn't do any dodgy undertaking like I did the first time. I panicked a little bit because my observer told me what exit to take and I thought I was in the right lane here, but then I got a bit confused by the signs. I ended up changing lanes and I got a little bit too close to that green car in front of me. It doesn't really show on camera, but I did eventually go around it. Just at this point I was a little bit closer than the normal 2-second gap that you should have on a normal motorway. I think this is just another inexperienced thing. I usually pick my lane for an exit at the 1 mile marker, and if there's a car like this going a little bit slower in front of me, I can't always judge whether I have enough space to go around it or not, but actually looking back at the video I had plenty of space to do the overtake that I did eventually do. I was going to pick this gap in between the 2 cars, luckily decided against it and just did a double overtake instead. Overall pretty good going, and I'm happy with how I did on the motorway section. Then it was off the motorway and onto some of the really nice roads my observer had planned for me. I love these country lanes personally, and this road is definitely one that you could get yourself in trouble on, but I was sensible and I did keep it to 60. My little unintentional off-road excursion last month has really knocked my confidence on the lanes, and I find that I'm a lot more cautious around bends now, which is a good thing because obviously I don't want to have another near miss. But I'd really like to start building my confidence back up again. I used to be a lot happier doing 60 down the lanes, so I really want to get back to that. I was enjoying this nice straight road, no bends, no traffic, no junctions, you can just do 60 the whole way, and this went on for a couple of minutes and it was really nice. I complained on previous rides about missing my observer signals and how frustrating it is. One thing that really helped on this ride is using cues to check my mirrors, so for example if I see a junction or I see a road sign or anything like that, I'll just quickly check my mirrors, and on this ride I didn't miss any signals doing that, so it was pretty good. Next up was a little bit of town riding. I completely missed this mini roundabout and just went flying straight over it. Luckily there was no other traffic coming, but it was just an area where I could have looked a little bit earlier. I'm not a huge fan of roundabouts, so my observer said this is an area where you can tell that I'm still a little bit inexperienced. I tend to hug the centre island of the roundabout rather than taking a more dominant road position. I'm not really sure why, I guess it's just something that I have to practice a bit more. This road is a national speed limit, and it's a good example of one where maybe I'm a little bit too cautious, not so much around the bends, but on the straights. If there's nothing oncoming and there's no junctions, there's no reason you can't be doing 60 down these roads. In the past I think I would have been a little bit more confident on roads like these, so I'm going to go out and practice more and hopefully build my confidence back up to where it used to be. It does make for a nice cruising speed though. On normal rides we probably would have stopped for 1 or 2 breaks by now. We stop usually every 20 minutes or so, but on this ride we wanted to use it as an opportunity to kind of test my concentration levels, because when you take your test it's usually about an hour and a half and you don't really stop for breaks, so it's a good opportunity to test whether you're still focused by the end of that or not. And I think I did really well considering that I haven't been riding for very long at all, so I'm quite happy with how I did on this ride. The speed dropped down to a 30 here, and it's easy to ignore these signs, but the lower speed limits, I usually follow those religiously, and this is a really good example of why you shouldn't go bombing into a situation where you just don't have the vision. At 30 miles per hour this is a non-issue, but you can imagine at 60 or 70, you find yourself in a scary situation pretty quickly. It's hard being in a small vehicle, either a motorbike or a bicycle, because sometimes cars will just come bombing towards you like this even if it's your right of way. Being smaller and more vulnerable, sometimes you just have to pull over and wait or give up priority just for the sake of keeping yourself safe. I had a chat with my observer after the ride about situations like these, and we kind of said that if there's room for you, the car, and if the parked car opens their door, if there's room for all 3 of you to pass, then sometimes we might choose to move a little bit over to the curb so that us and the oncoming car can both pass simultaneously. If the road's too narrow for the oncoming car and a parked car opening their door to all fit through, then it might be good to just dominate your lane or just wait for the car to pass. As with a lot of these things, it just depends on the situation, but keeping yourself safe always has to be the priority. My first overtaking opportunity of the day was about to present itself. This slow moving truck pulled out in front, and unfortunately on a really narrow road where there really weren't a lot of good places to get around it. This potentially would have made a decent spot, but I would have had to have been right close behind the truck to be able to make the overtake and get back in time for the next bend. So a learning point from this was to close the gap a little bit more around the bends, because there's potentially an overtaking opportunity when you get around the other side. But I don't want that to be taken out of context. That doesn't mean to tailgate the truck the whole way down the road. There's a bit of a system to this, so if you guys haven't had the in-person training, then I'd really recommend doing that, because a lot of this sort of advice gets lost in translation over videos. This was my second overtaking opportunity, and it's a good example of when it makes sense to close the gap on the vehicle in front and when it doesn't. In this situation, I could see the solid white line system come into place from quite a way back, and I knew I wasn't going to overtake, so there's no point being super close behind the car in front. When the solid white line system lifts, then you can start to close the gap and plan for your overtake, but while you know it's not on, then there's no point being super close. But I was really happy with the overtake that I did manage to get in at the end. The GoPro distorts things a little bit, so this might be hard to see, but the hedges are really low, so I could see the two cars approaching, I could see there was nothing behind them, and I overtook him right around this left-hand bend. It takes a lot of confidence, skill and planning to do that, so I was happy that I pulled it off. One piece of feedback is it could have just been a little bit quicker, just to minimise the amount of time that I was in the oncoming lane. But overall, fairly happy that I had the opportunity to finally open the bike up. My observer threw a Ford crossing into the route just for the fun of it. I did get prior warning, but I was still a bit nervous, so I stopped here on the other side, eventually plucking up the courage to give it a go, but I did let my observer go to be the guinea pig. Apparently if the water is flowing, then it's usually okay to ride through depending on how deep it is, but if the water is still, then you want to be a little bit careful because there might be moss or something that's grown on the bottom. Nice. So overall, a really good ride and one that I'm really happy with. I'm not quite test ready, but after just a few more observed rides, I reckon I'll be there. The main thing I'm going to work on in my own time is just building my confidence back up after that little scare, and hopefully after that there's not really much that I need to polish. You can't really go wrong with a whole fleet of 1s and 2s, and I'm really happy to finally be able to see that in my book. There's a couple of 3s in areas that I just need to polish up a little bit more, like my slow control. I also don't need to indicate as much as I've been doing. A few 2s on things like motorways. I just have to be careful when coming back to lanes that I'm not merging into someone else's blind spot. But other than that, I had a really good ride, and if I can repeat that on future rides, then I'll be really happy with myself. Safe riding, and I'll see you guys in the next one.